You couldn't make it up. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor who recently imposed one of the most punitive inheritance tax policies in modern British history, now finds herself at the centre of a Supreme Court seizure order over her own inheritance arrangements. Let that sink in. While families earning as little as £20,000 per year face a looming wave of inheritance tax bills, an estimated 170,000 cases, Reeves herself has been caught employing an elaborate series of tactics to shelter her family wealth from HMRC. The level of hypocrisy is staggering. After months of preaching about fairness and insisting the tax would affect only the wealthiest, it now appears she was, in private, engaged in the very conduct she condemned, dressing up evasion as planning. According to insiders, the Supreme Court has now ordered the seizure and comprehensive review of Reeves's estate. The findings reveal she allegedly established offshore structures, transferred property holdings to shell family trusts, and even rerouted pension assets, all designed to circumvent the same inheritance tax measures she inflicted on millions of ordinary Britons. This is not merely a scandal, it is a political earthquake. Reeves, long positioned as Labour's moral compass on fiscal justice, now stands accused of shielding her own wealth while targeting those with far less. The Chancellor who championed the taxation of pensions as part of one's estate from 2027 onwards, thus hitting even modest savers with 40% tax upon death, was, it seems, unwilling to subject herself to the same regime. The contrast is galling. A person earning £20,000 annually, living in a £268,000 home, below average in many parts of the country, and having a modest pension, would find their family liable for a steep inheritance tax. Meanwhile, Reeves allegedly ensured that her own assets were well beyond the reach of the Exchequer. The legal ruling is damning. The Supreme Court has determined that her asset transfers constituted a deliberate circumvention of public tax policy. One judge, it is reported, described the scheme as a cynical exploitation of laws she publicly championed. Let us examine the consequences of her policies. Reeves froze the inheritance tax threshold at £325,000, despite rampant inflation and spiralling property prices. She reclassified pension savings as part of taxable estates, affecting millions who had spent decades saving. Under her watch, the proportion of estates subject to inheritance tax doubled, from 5% to 10%. She targeted savers rather than spenders, builders rather than shirkers. Meanwhile, the Treasury quietly acknowledged that Reeves's policies would result in an additional 121,000 families being hit with inheritance taxes every year. Yet, when it came to her personal circumstances, she reportedly relied on the very loopholes she refused to close for the ultra-wealthy. The disparity is now undeniable. The same tax planning strategies Reeves branded as unethical when used by billionaires were perfectly acceptable, apparently, when used for her own benefit. And the judiciary has taken note. So, what becomes of the thousands of British families who will lose not only their inheritance but also their homes and life savings? Until now, Reeves's fortune had been untouched. But that is no longer the case. Her assets are now frozen, her estate under forensic scrutiny, and her legacy irrevocably damaged. This episode is more than a policy failure, it is a moral collapse. What was sold to the public as a tax on the rich has become a system that punishes responsibility, savings, and self-reliance. And all the while, Labour's front bench, the very architects of this financial onslaught, appear to have exempted themselves. Let there be no ambiguity, this is not a misunderstanding. It is a premeditated betrayal, and its consequences are deeply damaging to public trust. Britain now suffers from the lowest investment levels in the G7. Our productivity trails 20% behind that of the United States. Entrepreneurs are increasingly disinclined to pass businesses on to their children, thanks to Reeves's punitive tax framework. And how has Reeves responded to the crisis? She hasn't. She has vanished from public view, sheltered behind Labour's media apparatus, while families across the country scramble to reassess their financial futures. This saga exemplifies the duplicity many now associate with the political elite: tax the workers, protect the insiders. Ordinary citizens face audits, penalties, and crushing death duties. Meanwhile, the privileged elite employ legal teams, offshore vehicles, and trust structures to protect their fortunes. Other countries have chosen a different path. The United States imposes no federal inheritance tax below $13 million. In France and Germany, children are often exempt. Denmark's system is more proportionate and better targeted. In the United Kingdom, however, we penalize the deceased and impoverish their descendants. Why? Because Rachel Reeves, it appears, needed your money. Not for frontline services, but for bloated bureaucracy, asylum hotel contracts, EU alignment initiatives, and endless diversity programs. Now, however, the tide has turned. The Supreme Court's landmark ruling has shattered Reeves's credibility and dealt a severe blow to Labour's moral authority on tax justice. And whispers are already spreading through Westminster: more MPs are under scrutiny, more assets are under review, and more seizures are anticipated. This is not the end. It is the beginning. Rachel Reeves targeted your inheritance. Now the law has targeted hers. And justice, at last, is beginning to catch up. Elon Musk, father of tech magnate Elon Musk and a seasoned engineer known for his forthrightness, has delivered a devastating blow to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's credibility, on the global stage no less. While much of the mainstream media has remained conspicuously silent, the fallout from this legal confrontation is now reverberating well beyond Westminster. The controversy began when Sir Keir Starmer, already under mounting pressure as Labour's embattled leader, made an unprovoked and baseless attack on Elon Musk. The offence? Speaking candidly about Britain's alarming slide into censorship and institutional decay. Musk had appeared on GB News, where he gave one of the most cutting and honest interviews of the year. Calm, articulate, and resolute, he denounced what he saw as a growing culture of suppression in Britain, highlighting, in particular, the case of a young woman imprisoned over a tweet. Yes, a single social media post. Rather than engaging with the substance of his concerns, Starmer's camp launched into a smear campaign, branding Musk a purveyor of disinformation, an inciter of division, and even suggesting links to online extremism. It was, quite plainly, a politically motivated character assassination. But the attempt backfired, and spectacularly so. In a courtroom showdown that captured international attention, Starmer's legal team sought to justify their defamatory claims. Yet, the evidence was unequivocal. There were no extremist affiliations. No incitement. No criminal conduct. Just a man articulating views shared by millions but rarely aired on establishment platforms. The judge did not hold back. He chastised Starmer's legal representatives for their gross misrepresentation, condemning what he described as a weaponization of public institutions against dissent. The ruling was clear: this was not about justice, it was about intimidation. A political leviathan attempting to silence a lone voice. But that voice only grew louder. The origins of this political clash lie in Musk's open support for Nigel Farage, who has once again shaken the foundations of British politics. In his GB News appearance, Elon Musk praised Farage's resilience, suggesting he had finally ceased being overly conciliatory and was offering the strength many in the public desperately crave. He even hinted that Elon Musk himself had encouraged Farage to return to the political front lines. That was the final straw for Starmer's team. Lacking the courage to respond with ideas, they opted instead for character assassination. And when there was no dirt to dig, they invented it. Musk's interview didn't stop at Farage. He offered a broad critique of Britain's faltering institutions, especially the police and their failure to maintain public safety. If there's a terror threat, he said, the public deserves to know. The police shouldn't withhold information to appease political correctness. For such plain speaking, he was branded a threat to social cohesion. The reaction from Labour circles was telling. Rather than defend the principles of free expression and open debate, Starmer's allies attacked the messenger. But this time, it didn't work. The court ruling has turned the tables. Starmer has not only lost the legal battle, he has suffered a severe reputational blow. Public confidence in his leadership, already strained, has taken another dent. Voters are increasingly recognizing a pattern: censorship over dialogue, coercion over persuasion, and a disturbing tendency to suppress views that diverge from party orthodoxy. Perhaps most damning is the wider international response. In the United States, Senator J.D. Vance has cited Britain as a cautionary tale, warning that the UK's descent into authoritarianism may soon be mirrored elsewhere if left unchallenged. Starmer's Britain, once admired as a bastion of democratic freedoms, is now a case study in what happens when dissent is criminalised. Consider the case of Lucy Connolly, the young woman jailed for a tweet. Elon Musk's decision to highlight her plight resonated deeply. How, he asked, can a democracy imprison individuals for expressing an opinion? It was a question many are now asking, as fears grow that free speech in Britain is becoming little more than a slogan. Starmer's response was not to defend civil liberties but to destroy the man raising the alarm. And yet, that strategy has crumbled. Instead of silencing Musk, it has amplified him. Instead of burying the truth, it has broadcast it. Elon Musk has emerged from this ordeal not only vindicated but emboldened. He won in court. He won in the eyes of the public. And in doing so, he laid bare the fragility of a system that cannot tolerate criticism, no matter how well-founded. Millions have now watched his GB News interview. What they saw was not a radical, but a man of conviction, measured, composed, and fiercely principled. A man unafraid to confront what he sees as the creeping tyranny engulfing a country he once held in high esteem. In the end, he stood his ground, and the system blinked.